welcome back, everybody. Next up is Melinda Leslie and Niara Isley. A few brief words about these two young ladies. Known Melinda for the best part of 20 years. Melinda is herself a experiencer. And her own personal experiences has led her down a particularly difficult path. All people that delve into this abductee-contactee area, if you're a researcher, if you begin to work with people, do some regressions, do any therapy, eventually you're going to run across some cases and some evidence and some testimony that's going to kind of set you back on your ear, because there is a body of evidence, ever growing, that sometimes when people are tapped on the shoulder, it's not only aliens that are around, sometimes it's human beings also. And strangely, these human beings seem to have our own military uniforms on. So this is getting into a dark area, a deep area. And most of the abduction researchers, when they get this data, they just kind of set it aside. They almost dismiss it because it doesn't fit the preconceived idea we're dealing with. So there is something else going on here. And Melinda has developed most of the last 20 years she's put into trying to find out the truth of this. And then we have Niara Isley, and I met her only last year here at the conference. And I think I might have been one of the first people to which she had the courage to tell her whole story. And it's an amazing one. And she's here to share that with us also. So this is going to be a treat this next 2 hours. Please welcome Melinda Leslie and Niara Isley.
Hello. Thank you for coming. As Bob said, I'm going to talk for an hour and then Niara.
Yes.
And so she's going to relax. Anything you want to say before we start?
No, I just thank you for being here, and I'll be talking about my experiences and how actually coming to grips with them and setting aside the fear has just really, really expanded my consciousness. I'm going to be talking about experiences, healing process, and then this wonderful consciousness expansion. So thanks.
All right. Well, I'll see you in a while.
Okay, all right.
Well, I have a lot to cover in a short period of time. And, I could stand up here and give a 4-hour workshop without taking a breath. And so please bear with me. To stay on track, I admit, I'm going to be reading a lot of the presentation, basically, to stay on track. So I apologize in advance for that, but it's the only way I'm going to get through this. My research is the covert ops reverse engineering of extraterrestrial abductees. In what may ultimately prove to be some of the greatest evidence for the reality, importance, and meaning of the UFO abduction scenario, extraterrestrial abductees are apparently being targeted by human covert ops intelligence and/or military agencies. If there's no such thing as ET abduction, then why is this happening to people who have nothing in their lives to warrant this kind of interest by the human covert ops agencies other than they claim to have experienced an ET abduction? The experiences of harassment, surveillance, and re-abductions suggest that there must be something very important about ET abductions and the abductees, or why all the time, energy, resources, and money being spent. And before I go on really quick, I'm going to say, don't worry about following. I know some of these slides are very, very heavy in text. I do have a book of all my notes combined from about 4 different presentations I've put together. I worked really, really hard on it for the past couple of weeks to really get it ready. And we will be out at the table Niara has sample chapters from a book she's writing. She'll tell you more about that. And I have the book of my lecture notes, which, like I said, it's combined from 4 presentations. The only way I'd cover everything in that book is if I had 4 or 5 hours to sit up here and talk about it. So again, don't worry if you miss something in here. You can check out the book and read it at your leisure when you want. Of course, we're selling these, but we're keeping the price down for you. So, okay. How many ET abductions are there? Well, the number of ET abduction experiences is higher than you think, and abductions have been going on longer than you know. Many leading abduction researchers have upwards of 500 to 1,500 and more cases each and growing. This includes, of course, international research. Some worldwide abduction research and support organizations have in their case files, case files numbering over 10,000 in some organizations. So these are investigated on the books kind of cases. Some members of the abduction research community state that abductions may be happening as much as 10 to 15% of the world population. I know that number's high, but I've recently heard a couple of researchers say that. The world's population, according to the US Census Bureau website as of beginning of February this year, is over, was it 6,800,350,000 people. 15% of the world's population is 1,020,000,000 possible abductees, based upon those numbers. Even if you take the more conservative view of the 10 to 15%, if you go 10% of the population, you still have well over 680 million abductees. And I don't want anyone to say, oh, Melinda says there's a billion. Please don't do that. I am saying this is what is out there in the research community. These are the numbers that are often given, this idea of 10 to 15%. I just wanted you to break that down into actual world population numbers so you can wrap your head around it. Also, abductions go back to the genealogy of many abductee families, 3 and 4 generations. This is well known in abduction research. Abductees, their kids have it happen, their parents have it happen. Sometimes they know their grandparents have had it happen. To go back 4 generations is now actually commonplace in abduction research. I now know of a case, actually I know of 2 cases going back 5 generations. In both cases, great-great-grandmothers wrote about it in the 1800s. So this goes back in families, and it's been going on for a very long time. There was a Roper poll conducted in 1981 with questions tacked on by Bud Hopkins, David Jacobs, Ron Westrom, Dr. John Mack, and John Carpenter. According to the Roper organization, the total respondents answering yes to the 5 key indicator questions used to determine if someone may be an abductee, and it was all done very scientifically. None of the questions were grouped together. When you answered the questions on your Roper form, you weren't going to know what they were referring to. But you had to have answered yes to the 5 key indicator questions. 2%, and the Roper organization said it was 2% of the sample. 2% of the 185 million adult Americans represented in the poll was 3,700,000. So I took that 2% number and said, that's based on science. That's the Roper organization saying this is some pretty hard science. These gentlemen put a lot of thought into the questions to have it be very specific, and you had to answer yes to all 5. And the chance that you could answer yes to 1, 2, or 3 of them and have, paranormal experiences or something, yes. But to answer yes to the 5 key questions, it was pretty definitive to the kind of experience, specific to abduction. And in doing so, they came up with this idea of 2%. So I took 2% of the world's population. So this is based upon science. This is the most conservative possible number out there. Would mean, if you applied it to the world's population alive today, 136,027,000 abductees alive today. Well, basically, and of course abductions exist around the world. Alien abductions are reported everywhere, South America, Brazil, Russia, all over Europe, all over the US, et cetera, et cetera. Anything happening to this many people, especially something taking place in such a covert manner as ET abductions, would have to be a matter of national security. In the same way that ET abductions are generational, so let me start with the top there. When did covert ops involvement start? Well, in the same way that ET abductions are generational, going back in families, so too are covert ops experiences. I have adult cases that have had covert ops experiences when they were children and were taken by military along with their parents. I have adult cases who discovered their parents had these types of experiences separately from them. So now I'm speaking specifically not to the alien abduction numbers I was before, but specifically to the covert ops involvement. I have 4 cases where the abductees' kids have experienced covert ops experiences, and actually all 4 were taken without their parents present. These were children. Many of the cases have intelligence community connections going back in their families. Many also include family members in aerospace, NASA, covert and secret technology programs. And I just put forth the question, is there a connection? The experiences show that one of the prime reasons for the covert ops involvement is the genetic study, so it makes sense to include families. It has long been understood that genetics is a leading reason, not the, but one of the leading reasons for ET abductions, i.e., for example, the production of hybrids, people being shown their hybrid children, extremely common. Hence, why a covert ops interest. Covert ops abduction experiences go far back in abduction history and may exist in relatively high numbers. From covert ops involvement cases I've interviewed and the cases of other researchers, data has emerged clearly showing that these experiences go back in time to at least the 1950s. I have many cases that talk about, adult cases now talking about when they were children. I have 3 or 4 cases that go back to 1952, that in 1952 they said they had this happen. In a discussion with Kathleen Martin, here we go. I'm going to get a little controversial. In a discussion with Kathleen Martin, co-author with Stanton Friedman of Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience, and she is the niece of Betty Hill, okay? She explained that this case included the Hills having covert ops involvement subsequent, I'm going to emphasize, subsequent to their famous original 1961 abduction. They experienced, the Hills subsequently experienced, harassment, surveillance, and a re-abduction of Barney. Researcher re-abduction, not by aliens, but by covert ops or military. Minder scenarios and other elements typically found in my research. Researcher Joe Montaldo, a famous abduction researcher and behind the scenes, but head of an organization called ICAR, after listening to the original regressions of the Hills and reading the transcripts from the original sessions, he made a controversial discovery that their initial experience may have happened in 2 parts, over 2 days. One with an ET abduction one day, and the next with actually in Canada with an ET abduction, crossed the border into the US, and then had a military one. He said Barney is adamant in the session tapes and in the transcriptions of them, that he said Barney is absolutely adamant that it was military personnel. Now, I know that's extremely controversial, so I talked to Kathleen about it. She said she does not believe, she's pretty adamant that it did not happen over 2 days. It was one experience, an ET only. Fine. I can sidestep that because then, that regardless, according to Kathleen, the Hills did have subsequent covert ops involvement, with harassment, surveillance, minder scenarios, black helicopters, phone stuff, et cetera, all the things in my research after their subsequent experience and for years following. While reading Witness to Roswell by Don Schmidt and Tom Carey, I noticed many profound similarities between the intimidation experiences described by many Roswell witnesses to abductees' experiences. Covert ops involvement with abductees is a current manifestation and a continuation of an ongoing witness, harassment, and monitoring program that has existed throughout ufology history. It is business as usual. Many abductees have experienced covert ops, even if they don't report it. At a support meeting, I mentioned my research and had assumed the group did not have many experiences, but found that I was wrong. After sharing, I noticed that more than half of the group of 20 people present were nodding their heads in the affirmative and making facial expressions, clearly implying that they had had the experience similar to those I was describing. I was surprised by their reactions. Additionally, the therapist who led this group was unaware, this is very important, was unaware of the possible covert ops experiences amongst their own cases. And while attending a support group at a conference where various attendees shared their abduction experience, I noticed some of these individuals were including covert ops activities with their accounts. Struck by the number of people who were describing such events, I asked the group to raise their hands if they knew they had military involvement, and 8 people did so. There were 30 people present, and I was surprised that 8 out of 30 in a group. It's important to note that these groups were completely random sampling of abductees who had experienced various forms of ET abduction and who were different levels of acceptance of their ET experience. In other words, they were all coming at it from a different level, from a different amount of knowledge, yet 8 out of 30. I can't help but realize how surprised many abduction researchers, not to mention general ufologists, would have been by the number of responses. That these random samplings represent a statistically bigger picture of covert ops experiences. In the second group, a total of 8 out of 30 abductees may have had involvement. Of course, these numbers have staggering implications. Additionally, covert ops abductees feel covert ops experiencers feel that other ET abduction experiencers won't, and the researchers won't understand the difficulty of living with these particularly unique experiences. For example, covert ops cases regularly express that their ET experiences are never as bad as their covert ones. As expressed by one of my cases, but out of all my experiences with varying alien beings, no experience has made me more angry than those that have involved the military. And another one said, the aliens are never as bad as the military are always worse. I actually hear this consistently. Some of my cases have even asked the ETs for help or feel they've received help from the ETs in stopping their covert experiences. Now, I want to clarify that this isn't really the military, and I'm going to get into this a little bit more. But initially, I just want to say, I'm calling it covert ops because, to me, it puts such a negative emphasis on a military participation, when often these are guys in lab coats that are seen, guys in suits, threats and warnings by guys in civilian clothes. I cannot say it's all the military. There seems to be a huge amount of intelligence community involvement also in this. If abductions are real and happening anywhere near the scale suggested by the abduction researchers, and therefore more likely a matter of national security, or because of perception similar to that of Dr. David Jacobs with his threat theory, then of course the intelligence community would be interested in the abductees. These may be covert intelligence agencies and not the military, or at least a black world aspect of the military. I'm not slamming the military. I'm not going to read this whole thing here, but Helmut Lammer says we just have a right to know what goes on in special access programs, which is where he believes this is all being handled, again, in black ops. Before I move forward, I want to be very clear, very, very clear, that my research data does not in any way point to a military in lieu of abduction, in lieu of ET abduction thesis. That quite the contrary, there's a military and intelligence community involvement because of ET abduction experiences. Covert ops involvement exists because the ET abductions are absolutely real. And this is the only reason these agencies have any interest whatsoever in the abductees. And their interest in abductees is predominantly in what they know regarding ET motives and what they know about ET technology. Now, I want to talk about this real quick because you're going to hear Niara later, and she's one of my cases of what I call military on military involvement. Now, here I just said, I gave all this explanation and disclaimer, oh, it's not really the military doing this. It's not the military except for when it is. And military on military cases are alien abductees who've joined the military. Okay, 136 million possible alien abductees on the planet today, and that's the conservative number, pretty much suggests that a fair amount of those are going to be people in the military. Well, what happens then is some of these abductees, when they're in the military, then have this covert ops experience where they can be re-abducted, harassment, surveillance by the military while in the military. And you're going to hear a very amazing detailed case when you hear from Niara. Here's just some examples, some of the people that I've familiar with who are military on military cases. Obviously, Niara had 3 months of missing time. Bruce Coe, 3 weeks of missing time, used in ET communication. Ray Muniz, a gentleman I'm working with now that has 2 years of seamless missing time, was used in a variety of ET communication experiences during that period. Dan Sherman, very well known, wrote a book called Above Black, used consciously in communication role. Larry Warren, who's here with us, and who shared much more of his experience with me and a small group of people the other night. He's going to talk about it a little bit more Saturday, I hope, Larry, wherever you are. Yeah, definitely you want to hear Larry Saturday morning. So everybody get to bed early Friday. You won't want to miss that. John Vasquez, Vance Davis, a gentleman Andrew, James Bartley, an unnamed female, and a new case of mine. Her name is Allison, and her family. Her family was in the military, moved all over to different bases all over the world, and had these covert ops re-abductions from a variety of these bases, and her father was a high-ranking military official. Who all are doing this? Well, covert ops experiences happen internationally. International cases often involve military and/or intelligence personnel from the country where the experience is occurring. They involve U.S. military and U.S. agents, U.S. and foreign subcontractors, and foreign military or foreign agents. Often, U.S. personnel are seen in conjunction with the foreign personnel. So, and of course, this has happened to some abductees while traveling. Someone travels to France, has a military experience there. They're a U.S. abductee, if you will, and yet they have the military experience. They may experience French military and U.S. military together, just as an example. And then, of course, the majority of the numbers I'm about to give you are people who are from that country. So their country of origin is where they're having this happen. This is just what I'm currently aware of as of about 2 weeks ago, and this number is increasing all the time. But 19 cases in the UK, 4 in France, 3 in Germany, 4 in Italy, some in Iran. The Iranian cases, interestingly, happened with U.S. military and U.S. subcontractors. Indonesia, Australia, Peru, Puerto Rico, China, Russia, Munich, West Germany, India, 9 in Canada, and 9 in Mexico. These are just the cases I'm currently aware of. It's growing all the time. So if you're an international case, I'm particularly interested in hearing about your experience. So what happens to the abductees? So like, what the heck are you talking about, Melinda? What do you mean? What's going on? Well, they're being watched and being followed and have their home or workplace under surveillance. Black helicopter surveillance and harassment, threats made to the abductee, their family, and friends, phone interruptions, and harassing, intimidating, or even threatening phone calls, email and snail mail tampering, and computer hacking, in-person direct face-to-face confrontations and warnings, and MIB, Men in Black, experiences, illegal break-ins to property, homes, and vehicles, underground bases visited and advanced technology seen, abductions by ETs with human military personnel present or being handed over. You know, I had this conversation with Joe Montaldo, and he said, you know, half of my cases are people who were abducted by ETs and then handed over to the military, and that's getting a lot of that. So handed over by the ETs to military personnel. Abductions by human militaries. This is where you're taken by human military, but there are ETs present. And then there's abductions by human military only without any ETs present, fully military, no ETs. There's mind control procedures with intimidation, fear inducement, hypnosis, and drugs, in-depth interrogation and debriefing procedures, being roughed up or physically abused, medical and genetic procedures, exploratory surgery, removal of possible alien fetuses. I'm aware of 3 or 4 cases with this. You hear about this in abduction research, that people feel they may have an alien fetus that then is removed by the ETs. Well, I've got about 4 cases of this that I'm aware of, and I'm sure there's more, but these are just the ones I've heard of, where they feel that the military took them and removed a possible hybrid fetus. Implants being removed or inserted by humans, testing and demonstration of psychic and paranormal abilities, and involvement by intelligence insiders in the personal life of the abductee. So here we go. Here's just some quick photos. I'm not going to read the text a lot on the screen. Again, you can look at the little book if you want to read these. But there's experiences of harassment and surveillance, obviously black helicopter, being watched, being followed. These are 2 different cases of someone being harassed by a black van, 2 different abductees. Black helicopter harassment, being watched, being followed by a black car, having your photo taken. This is an abduction from someone's backyard. These are all typical. I love this from Kim Carlsberg from her book. And here she's being taken by two guys in suits in the back of a black sedan. You can be taken to an underground base. These are just typical examples of underground base. This is from actually one of my experiences of being taken on an elevator underground. You can see military personnel in that installation. I know this will be hard to see, but this is actually someone's depiction of a base that was partially above ground, partially underground, and that there are humans and ETs present and ET ships. You can see humans and, human military and ETs together. You may see advanced technology and believe it's ours, that we've reverse engineered. You may see technology and be told it's theirs, in other words, it's ET. You can have in-depth interrogations, mind control procedures with hypnosis and drugging. This is a depiction of someone's needle situation being drugged. More mind control. This is someone's depiction of what they call brain mapping, but more procedures along that lines. And this is, again, from one of my experiences, medical and genetic procedures. I had a medical procedure in a hazmat clean room environment. And you can see medical and genetic experiments. This is an abductee's accounts of seeing what they thought were clones. And you can have mental testing and development of psi, which is paranormal functioning, paranormal abilities. And here somebody, in this depiction, obviously somebody is hooked up to a reptilian doing something mentally. What are my experiences? Real quick, my own experience is what started me investigating this. I want to clarify for everyone, I'm not a hypnotherapist. In fact, I'm not any kind of therapist at all, other than the therapy, I guess, that comes from people being able to have a shoulder to cry on, which sometimes is worth a lot. But I am an experiencer, an ET abduction experiencer, lifelong. I am a covert ops experiencer. I started investigating my own cases and met other people with cases, and they shared them with me, and then I started asking around, started interviewing researchers. I got into being public with my own abduction experiences 20 years ago and started doing this research 18 years ago, and now the community kind of says, it's her. So here I am. Okay, what are my experiences? I have the basic, standard, and normal ET abduction experiences and military. I have harassment and surveillance. I've had helicopter incidents, phone incidents, threats, and an influence to harm myself. I'll get more into that. Military reabductions. In 1990, I had two roommates witness military men shouting orders at me in my room at night. I have no memory of this, but I have two roommates that are adamant it happened. July 27, 1990, missing time while driving with two friends, taken with ETs, but a man in naval uniform was present monitoring the procedures. July 93, gynecological medical procedures performed in the hazmat environment. November 93, I was flown on a human-built triangular ship. There was a miscommunication screw-up, drugs administered, and I was interrogated extensively about ET technology. In the 90s, I experienced with a friend while traveling in Sedona, Arizona, our car was stopped by the military and I was escorted away. In the 1990s, I had an interrogation and was threatened with a gun put to my head in a military tent on a military base somewhere in the California desert. And August 20th, 2000, I was abducted with a friend out of her apartment, taken to an underground base. Both of us were interrogated, threatened, and we saw a reptilian with the military. And I have a lot of photo evidence of the break into the home when that occurred. Now, real quick, just as some basic ET stuff, this is me and the two friends who, and I have this story written up. So if you're interested in this, I'm selling it for only $1 for the copying. And I wrote up this story of myself and two male friends who were abducted together. Straight ET experience for the most part. So anyways, there's that. And this is us on board. That's me from the back and the two gentlemen. And then I've seen ET technology and in my abductions, and I've been interrogated about that. This is my rough drawing, and aviation artist Mark McCandlish did a redrawing for me. This is my drawing of being on an elevator in an underground base. Again, a rough sketch of mine, drawn within 48 hours of the experience from memory, completely conscious memory of being in this hazmat tented environment. And this is artist Bill McDonald's redrawing of my experience. Okay, I've started to call my research, too, REABs, not MILABs. And for those of you who may be familiar with this, MILABs or MILABs is what this research has generally been called in ufology. That term was coined by Helmut Lammer, who wrote a couple articles for the MUFON Journal and then put out a book called My Lab's Military Mind Control and Alien Abduction. Again, because I think it puts so much an emphasis on it being military, and I feel this is a huge part of intelligence community too, I thought that didn't apply, and it fell really short of explaining why. So I started to call it REABs, which I'll explain. And also because there were misidentification problems and incorrect assumptions. The assumption with MILAB or MyLab is that all abductions are military only and there are no aliens. Well, as I pointed out earlier, that's not the case. It's because there's real ET experiences. And then a couple of people said, well, it's all mind control. And then and that my labs were false abductions from the abduction research community, the idea that my labs are actually aliens and whatever, screen memories and, So, and I said, well, wait a second, none of this applies to this evidence I'm getting. So while REABS does mean reabduction, okay, means being reabducted by the military, it also means REABS, or the reverse engineering from abductees. So I call it REABS because that refers to reverse engineering of abductees. And there's a new formula for a more correct perception: crash retrievals plus reverse engineering plus abductions equals REABS. And I'm about to set out to explain all that. I want to say real quick that there's no dereliction of duty here. Globally, these guys are just doing their jobs. Trust me, I'm not making excuses for them. It would be a complete dereliction of duty if they were not involved. That is, if they're supposed to be defending us. I'm not defending what they're doing, but why, and what they're doing is obviously absolutely criminal. Anything happening to that many people worldwide would still warrant an intel agency interest, obviously. And not to mention, what part of abductions would they be most interested in? The technology. Why spend so much time and involvement on the abductees? Again, the technology. They would want to know, I'm going to skip through this a little for time here, how does the technology work? Could some of these abductees know something? And ultimately, they would be wanting to get their hand on the technology to somewhat level the playing field with the ETs. There are 4 categories of information that the covert ops ET information management people are looking for as reported in the reabduction experiences. There's ET motives and agenda, ET and abductee genetics, ET and abductee psi abilities, and ET technology. These are primarily the 4 things I'm getting. Richard Dolan once gave a talk, and his write-up for the talk that he gave, I'll tell you the title of the talk, was After the Retrievals, the Covert Program to Replicate Alien Technology. This will take a while to read, but I just want to paraphrase it. He said, attaining a UFO is one thing. Clearly that exotic technology would have a home in deeply secret places within the government. And he went on to say that there would be an extreme interest to develop this and that there would be a program to replicate alien technology over 50 years. That he said that this evidence is strong and that breakthroughs have been made in the technology development. The evidence is strong for real breakthroughs that have been made and applications that are being used covertly, such as within a secret space program. Secretly about these programs and technology breakthroughs must be maintained because revelations would unravel the entire source of secrecy, structure of secrecy. This includes not only the truth about extraterrestrials, but the labyrinth of illegal black infrastructure that has become entrenched as a true state within a state. So here's Dolan. So, I can tell you there's a reverse engineering program, but here's Dolan giving a perfect description of it. And again, this is in the book if you want to read it. What does the covert ops ET information management people want to reverse engineer from abductees? Well, why would they want to do that? Here we go. What makes us an abductee? Why are the ETs interested in us? What is it about our genetics that they're interested in? Have we had any genetic enhancements? What do we know about ET motives or ET agenda? What mind control procedures can they learn, develop, or practice on us? What are our psi, paranormal abilities? Have they been enhanced? How do we do ET psi, like telepathy and telekinesis? What are our mental abilities? What have the ETs told, shown, or taught us? What do we know about ET technology, like propulsion systems, navigation, or weapons? How do we operate ET technology? Can we operate a piece that they hand to us? What types of training procedures can the humans develop from us? What medical info can they develop from what we know or from our physical bodies? What can they practice on us? How do we process and or retain ET information? How do we adapt to the ETs? How do we adapt to living with our experiences? And what can they duplicate and apply to our human technology or to our human personnel? The previous questions came directly from abductees' accounts of what the interrogators asked them during the reabduction scenarios. They make logical sense when you follow crash retrieval and reverse engineering developmental curve. First there were retrieved alien craft, then there were retrieved components, and then there were the pilots and the operators, the technicians. These individuals would otherwise be known as the personnel. It's logical when you develop the hardware, you're left with asking, who's going to operate it and how are they going to do it? Certainly, those involved with the management, these covert ops, thought to consider personal accounts of those with first-hand, hands-on ET tech experience. Those who may have operated it, worked its components, navigated, or flown it. Of course they would have. Let's suppose that crash retrievals are about having ET tech, and reverse engineering is about having human tech that does what ET tech does, or at least mimics it. Then reverse engineering crashed, shot down, or retrieved alien craft is not just about having ET hardware, but about having human tech that does what ET tech does. If reverse engineering the abductee is, reverse engineering the abductee is more about having personnel that are able to do what abductees are able to do. If reverse engineering the craft is about the technology, then reverse engineering the abductee is about the personnel. Or better yet, it's about the personnel and the technology. Because when covert ops personnel question the abductee, they get both technical information and operational information. Another way to look at it is you need a hybrid person to operate a hybrid technology. Well, no wonder there's a covert interest in abductees' genetics as well. Or maybe a little more accurately, you need a hybrid functioning person to operate a hybrid functioning technology. Why are they developing this technology? Well, the covert ops efforts to get their hands on it, I've come up with a couple of reasons. I'm going to go right to those. These are what I surmise were the reasons. Militarism. The old military mindset may be at work here and would certainly apply if the covert ops community thinks ETs may be a threat. Whether preparing for a hot war or a cold war with ETs, it justifies a whole lot of black project spending. Even if they're only preparing for some possible future scenario, then it could be seen as justification enough for military buildup in the form of ET tech. Politics. They may be attempting to, as I said earlier, level the playing field and hold their own with the ETs, or working towards eventually joining some galactic community. So political reasons with the ETs. Economy. The bottom line may be the bottom line. ET technology would be potentially lucrative in preparation for commerce and trade with ETs, as well as in military, industrial, complex development and application for more mundane uses, let alone the economic potential from the advancement of military technologies and any development of breakthrough ET-related technologies. I heard an insider say about a year ago that ET technology is an infinite source of wealth for those managing the information and for their secret programs. Real quick, just a brief mention about the researchers. I have more information in the book about the different researchers and where they stand on the subject. I didn't want to get into it in depth here, but here's just kind of a couple notes that I think are important. John Mack was really supportive of my research, thank God. And I interviewed him, and he gave me this great quote. For time's sake, I'm not going to read it, but again, in the book, I'm so grateful to him, and he definitely had cases of this and talked to me in depth about it. Carla Turner inspired me to go forward and do this. Early on in my research, Carla said, Melinda, you must do this. You must go public. You must go forward. And she was a huge, huge inspiration to me. Both of these people, of course, greatly missed by this community. As I mentioned before, Joe Montaldo, I'm only going to mention him because this is a very new information I got from him. ICAR has over 8,800 on-the-file abduction cases, 800 cases with harassment surveillance, 800 cases, 450 cases with reabduction, and he said more than half of those, the abductees claim they were handed off by the ETs to the military. He has 7 cases of mass military abduction. These are hundreds of abductees being taken together by the military. Him and his wife, Linda, were involved in one of these incidences in Florida where there were hundreds of abductees with the military at one time. He has 50 to 75 international cases of covert ops in mostly allied nations. A lot of the reason why major abduction researchers are not paying enough attention to this is I can't help but wonder if it's due in great part to their misperception having led, as I said before, to a military in lieu of ET's concept instead of what the experiences show, that it's a military because of ET's concept. To me, this is some of the greatest research in favor of the reality of abductions. I'm going to talk about evidence really quickly. There's evidence for ET abductions in general. Punctures to the skin, bruises, cuts, x-rays people have had, needle marks, scars that appear healed overnight, burn marks on the body, implants that have been removed, gynecological, urological problems. People have taken lie detector tests, documented missing time accounts, witnesses to these experiences, mass group abductions, and of course, a great deal of collaborating stories amongst the abductees. Here's just some really quick pictures of evidence for ET abduction. Needle mark, scoop mark, double scoop mark. Guy had one scoop mark, was re-abducted, got another. Again, this is in my notes. Unusual burn marks on the hand. These are burn marks going up a leg. Burn marks on the back of a neck, a needle mark on an arm. This is someone who had a dusty television set, remembered that the ETs had touched the television screen, and the next day looked and found that they had marks left in the dust on the television. So this kind of environmental effects, very normal in abduction research, a lot of environmental evidence. Of course, implants removed. These are from the work of Dr. Roger Lear, two possible implants that have been removed. And then there's evidence for covert ops involvement. Bruising after the experience, physical symptoms, telephone interruptions, mail tampering, being followed in your car, agents taking photos of you, break-ins to your home or office with photos and documents missing, direct in-person confrontations, eyewitnesses to all these events, photos of helicopter flybys, black helicopter incidents, being drugged and then having medical lab tests done later showing you were drugged. I know of 2 cases that did this. They have the medical lab tests showing they were given exotic drugs that remained in their systems weeks after the event. Being watched and or followed, seeing an installation where you were taken and later verifying its existence, and information matching to underground base, and of course insiders that have confirmed the accounts for the abductees. Here's just some of the evidence for this. Black helicopter harassment, another black helicopter incident. These were photographed by the abductees. This is interesting. This is one of my cases. A gentleman was taken from his home. He's staying with his brother. He gets out. He's in the shower that day. He gets out with a towel wrapped around, goes into the hallway. There's 2 guys in camouflage waiting in the hallway. They drug him and take him, and they also drug his brother. They don't take his brother. His brother wakes up hours later, sprawled out on the master bed after having woken up from drugs. When he wakes up, this guy is gone. This guy shows up later, is locked out of the house and can't get in. But he remembers the guys in camouflage uniform leaning up against the wall. And his brother said the guy had his foot up. And sure enough, the military boot left a footprint on the wall. So this is a photo of the boot print. This is another case. This gentleman fought with one of the guards in one of his experiences, just argued with them, told one of the guards off. It's a guy. He told one of the guards off for mishandling him. After they left the room, the one he told off came back, and when no one was around, punched him in the groin. And he developed a hernia, and this is an x-ray and a medical report from the hernia he developed as a result of being punched. People, of course, see uniforms, and we're able sometimes to verify those uniforms, what branch, what they look like. Often what is mostly reported to me, in my cases, is naval uniforms. These are patches that have been seen. People are befriended by insiders often. Unfortunately, guys, I'm trying to move fast, but I am going to run out of time. But I'm going to get through a few more things. But again, I have the stuff in the booklet. I apologize for that. I'm going as fast as I can. It just takes too long. I have too much to say. Being befriended by insiders is real typical. This is from Angela Thompson Smith, who wrote Diary of an Abduction. She coined the term minders. And the minders are when you're befriended by these intelligence types who then seem to to interface in your life on a fairly regular basis. Sometimes they provide you information, sometimes they question you, sometimes they're validating and confirming your experience, and so, of course, sometimes they're threatening and warning you. But I have some more information in there. This is just kind of fun to say that, well, not fun, but you know, abductees sometimes give these minders nicknames. X is what, you know, a couple of them have said, I call him Mr. X or X, Bulldog, Destiny Man. These are some of the things I've heard. And I've had a lot of these experiences, and I've had some very weird, like, confirming situations that are like casual, but someone will just say something and say, oh, we're aware of this or that. And I call those my lab moments, like the old TV commercials and stuff, Malox moments. And it's because I get this little kind of, you know, the validation is very strange. On one hand, it's validation of your experience, and on the other hand, it's validation of your experience. And so, I get this little, like, queasy feeling when these weird events happen. And quite often they happen at conferences and stuff, where someone will, you know, some insider, some guy with military intelligence background will say something and say, well, we're aware of this, and we know you're doing this, or what, you know. But I call it a my lab moment. Evidence from my experiences, I had a vapor monitor verified, helicopters, phone interruptions, a red hair interrogator. I had 4 different insiders say that red hair interrogator was someone they were familiar with. Equipment and technology seen and verified, medical and surgical procedures I had done on me. I did not know the nature of them. I ended up talking to a surgeon who confirmed I had a very real experience because he said I described something I would have had no knowledge of. Location of base, 4 insiders confirmed a base location I was taken to underground, etc. So these are just some really few, just quick pictures, some bruises I received in one of my experiences. This is when I was taken with a friend from her apartment, the bruises I received. More bruises from that. On my arm, there's 2 fingerprints from the guard leading me down a hallway in an underground base in a long hallway. And he had me by the arm, and he wanted me to keep right with him, and he just had this, you know, death grip on my arm, and that bruised it. When we were taken from that apartment, the guys who came in were wearing dark jumpsuits and had night vision on helmets, very similar to this picture. And this is the damage they did to the door when they broke in. Here's the door frame ripped apart, the molding of the door locks having lots of damage. All this had just been freshly painted about 2 weeks prior to this event. So this was all brand new damage to what was brand new weather stripping, you know, so we knew it had just happened. In one of my experiences here, I saw this orange tenting in this room. I ended up finding in a hazmat supply catalog, you know, a safety supply catalog, this same kind of orange draping, exactly like what I saw. Exactly the same. I don't know if it is the same thing, but it was, in appearance, exactly what I saw. And then I saw this organic vapor monitor, which when they had me in this room, they had it filled with this heavy mist. It's a long story, but it was a medical procedure, and I believed it was like an antibiotic kind of situation where they were creating a super sterile environment. And they were wearing these on their belts, and I later found this in a catalog, organic vapor monitor, measures exposure in demanding and high humidity environments. I'm so sorry, I'm starting to get low on time, but I originally had 6 theories as to why this was going on in more in depth. I had original 3-part theory about the military wanting to keep up with the Joneses. They wanted the ET stuff so they could, again, level that playing field, keep up with them. That they were interested in the ETs and were, you know, using us to spy on them. And so these were my original theories, but it's grown way beyond this. And now my biggest main theory for this happening is what I call the quest for mental interface. And again, if you're more interested, there'll be much more information in that booklet. Mental interface is the ability for the mind to interact with the technology. It is very common that abductees express that the ET technology reacts to your thoughts. In the covert ops experiences, the interrogators always seem to be interested in the technology. They want to know what the abductee was shown, if they have ever had hands-on experience like navigating or flying the ship, and if the aliens described or showed them the mechanisms. Many abductees claim that the ETs have shown them the technology, and they seem to have to remote view, visualize, or connect with it in an energy sense. And here's just some examples. I'm going to jump right to some of these quotes from abductees. I drove a ship. I flew it. Ships run on emotion. The ships run on belief. The technology of the ship is all mind over matter. Abductees are being shown technology by the TEs. I willed a ship with thought. The ship did what I thought. These are all from different cases, by the way, all these quotes. I worked a console. They gave me a tour of the craft. They showed me the secrets of the doorways. They showed me how to make things float. The ship is alive. You just think it. Abductees are seeing ET technology being used by the military. I saw the military use a time portal. I saw a plasma rifle that wasn't ours. They gave me a virtual reality experience. They used a laser gun and the targets disappeared. They gave me let me see. I saw parked UFOs. I was flown there in a disc. These are the kind of things reported all the time. Abductees are interrogated about ET technology. This is straight from the interrogation stories. These are quotes from the abductees. Tell us about their technology. They asked me how the aliens maneuver the craft. They wanted me to spy for technology. They said, you don't know what you know. They told me they need to shoot them down. They told me you're the key to understanding. This is, again, just the technology that I happen to have seen, but this is typical, the ship propulsion system. No time to go in that detailed stories, so I'm moving along. I'm so sorry. Additional theories from my research. Covert ops interest in genetics. Again, the quotes from the abductees. These are from the experience. This is what they claim the interrogators and people in the military, people present, said to them. We're creating a hardy hybrid elite. You have superior genes. You are an important pivotal part of us. We're creating an upper echelon. Covert ops training and preparation. Abductees are being made to wear uniforms and are involved in military exercises or war game scenarios. Abductees are being trained in military procedures. They're being used to demonstrate communication with ETs. Abductees are often trained in all these procedures with military personnel and ETs together. Abductees are often tested for their reaction to situations. For example, are they able to run the course, and are they able to do it while under pressure? Abductees are often tested for their ability to perform under pressure. The preparation and training often involves the abductee showing military personnel or showing other abductees how to do it. During these training procedures, they're told things like, be a good soldier. This is boot camp. You're a traitor if you don't go along. We're programming the killer instinct. You belong to us. You are ours. What you're doing is important. And soldier girl or soldier boy. Hear that all the time. Covert ops development and practice of mind control is another thing they're interested. A couple of quotes. Fear things to get the abductee to never talk about it or forget it. Things like, you'll never see your children again. Remember, you have a daughter. One little kid was told, taken separately from her parents, and was told, don't ever talk about this or we'll kill your mom. We can shoot you and get away with it. We'll bury you in the desert. Obviously very reminiscent of Roswell witnesses. And a female abductee heard, your life is a play and the name of the play is Death of the Maiden. Abductees share being used as some sort of program spy. Again, I have more quotes. I'm gonna skip ahead just for time's sake. Gosh. Oh, man. The time. Often drugs are used. One abductee said they called the drugging a chemical restraint. I think that's really interesting. Abductees often report, as it says here, where they feel the entire next day, I'm nauseated, tired, slept, I'm sore, all these things. After these, of course, this also happens after the ET experience, but this seems to specifically be the result of being heavily drugged in these military experiences. More on mind control. I'm running out. And I don't want to use up any of Nyara's time. So, one thing I've often gotten from a lot of the cases is at some point they'll say, I'm going to pull out of the field. I'm pulling out. I can't deal with this anymore. And okay, I hear that from some of the covert ops cases after a number of years. And it makes sense, but I started to hear a pattern of this being said to me. I've had 3 separate cases say this specific phrase to me. And it was so strange. When they said, I'm done, I'm going to plow the field, I'm pulling back, I'm not, they said, there is no future in this for me. And I had 2 of these back to back. I I had a woman one night say this to me, and the next night, well, I'll tell you, it was Angela Thompson Smith, said this to me one night. There is no future in this for me. I'm pulling out. And the very next night, it's a long story, but I was somewhere and I saw Jim Sparks. And Jim Sparks sat me down. We had this long talk about his experiences, and he said, you know, Melinda, I'm going to pull out of the field. There is no future in this for me. 2 nights in a row, the exact same thing. I think they were being, what can I say, programmed, influenced to say that to me. This is really quick. I'm going to read this. Stanton Friedman once said on Coast to Coast radio program that disclosure of all the facts of the UFO subject would be the end of nationalism worldwide. He added that's not going to happen because it's the only game in town and that nations and governments don't want to cease to exist. Of course, that's a profound statement from Stanton. I would add that the mastery of the psi component, the paranormal component of the UFO ET subject is the greatest of those threats to nationalism. The paranormal component, within that lays the dormant human potential. Contact or interaction with ETs, worldwide, for everyone, will make the knowledge of our psi abilities, paranormal abilities, commonplace, and that dormant human potential will then be fully realized. Remote viewers from the old military units say they used to use the phrase, and nothing will be hidden from you. Well, I believe this paranormal component of the UFO question holds within it the ability for us to develop that unlimited potential where reading thoughts as an ET telepathy and manipulating matter with your mind, ET technology, exist. And when you develop that dormant human potential, nothing will be hidden from you. I think they may fear this most of all, knowledgeable and enlightened citizenship. When nothing is hidden from anyone, all the mechanisms of control melt away, Stanton's end of nationalism worldwide. This very problem was speculated as being part of the demise of the remote viewing unit, that those in the government said, what if these guys get so good they can view our own secrets? As desperate as the UFO controllers, you know, the guys managing the system, are to have these paranormal abilities in order to interact with ET, operate ET technology, or attempt to level the playing field with the ETs, they appear to be equally desperate to keep them from you. For when you have these abilities, their gig is up and the game is over. And quoting Stanton Friedman again, nations and governments don't want to cease to exist. I think Stan was obviously onto something, and I've pulled back another layer to suggest an even further reason why the UFO cover-up and policy of non-disclosure of all things ET remains in place. It's time that these covert ops abduction experiences are taken out of the closet and that they're given the research attention they deserve. After all, they're the best darn evidence for alien abduction and may be the very key to unlocking a UFO cover-up. At the very least, it's imperative to understand the MILAB and REAB scenarios, the impact these experiences are having on a covert technology development program, and in so doing, the impact that they are having on a cover-up. Imagine, could it be that abductions, ET abductions, have played an important part in the cover-up all along? That maybe, just maybe, abductions are the reason the extraterrestrials are even here, and that maybe the covert ops management folks have known this all along, hence why abductions have become a matter of national security or have always been a matter of national security. With REABs, alien abductions are no longer the bastard stepchild of the UFO research community. We're relegated to being only considered in very separate terms as if somehow unconnected or at best marginally connected to the other areas of research. This is my last one, so how's that? I'm getting it in there. Ufology can no longer afford to separate the research of crash retrievals, reverse engineering programs, technology development, the accounts of insiders, national security issues, UFO history, the cover-up, and our disclosure efforts from the abduction phenomenon. To leave out any aspect of a UFO equation that may lead to a clearer understanding of an extraterrestrial agenda, of a human military or intelligence community agenda, in other words, the cover-up agenda, or of a human and ET combined agenda, obviously, is to have an incomplete picture of the phenomenon. A correct hypothesis in ufology must include all the data. Understanding the REAB covert ops involvement builds a bridge for inclusion of the ET abduction subject in any disclosure discussion. A partial disclosure is no disclosure at all. All you would have then is a repackaged, new and improved cover-up. Thank you.
Okay, we'll be fine. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm not sure if I want to be confined behind this podium. I really appreciate all of you coming out to hear me. This is kind of a big deal for me to come out publicly with this story. There's an awful lot of things to say that are real uncomfortable for me to say to you. Oops. For me to say to you, and also probably are going to be uncomfortable for you to hear. But I consider them to be what I call evolutionary pressure. They certainly put pressure on me to evolve and to expand and to really, really go beyond myself to understand what exactly was going on. So I'm talking about from experiencing trauma to moving beyond fear. This is my chronology. I served from April of 1979 to 83. I was honorably discharged. I married for the second time while I was in the Air Force and stayed home as a wife and mom for a year. In 1984, I was employed by EG&G Special Projects in their technical resources facility. I'm sure you recognize that company name from many ET documentaries. I divorced in 1985, was laid off from EG&G in 1987. I attended University of Nevada, Las Vegas for a time. In 1993, I did a legal name change from Janet to Niara. So you'll notice some of my documentation has Janet on it. That was kind of a spiritual decision for me. It just seemed like government contract work after I got out of the military just seemed to go from one to the next to the next. So I was employed by Computer Sciences Corporation and by Science Applications International Corporation, SAIC, another one that figures fairly prominently in UFO documentaries. And both EG&G and SAIC employ a lot of ex-military personnel. There's my honorable discharge certificate, just to let you know that that's me. So after I got out of the military, I started to get what I call internal tremors. I started experiencing very, very alarming heart palpitations. My heart would take off at a mad gallop, and it would feel like somebody was choking me at the same time. Very, very unpleasant. I went to a doctor for it for a while. I didn't end up on medication. I decided to do yogic breathing to calm it down, and by some concentrated effort with that, that worked. I had anxiety and episodic depression. It was really hard. Of course, bad marriages didn't help, but when I actually thought about ending my life, and I was in a really good relationship at that time, so kind of go figure, you know. I had someone who was like a best friend as well as a relationship partner. But I just got to the point where the angst was so bad that couldn't hardly deal with life anymore. But the other thing that's really important to know about me is that I've always been a spiritual person from the cradle up. I was one of those kids that while I did play with toys, as soon as I could read, I was at the library checking out books on all the sciences, history, biographies. I really wanted to really know and understand the world that I lived in. It was very, very important to me. So that was my favorite activity, was being at the library, learning about the world I lived in and what my relationship to it and the larger universe might be. I went to church for a while, and that was like a dead end for me. I just, you know, I needed to find out everything I could about the world around me. So when I came up to the suicide, I had done a number of readings about near-death experiences, notably Raymond Moody's book, Life After Life. And so then some of my own spiritual experiences up to that time pointed out to me that if I actually did kill myself, I wasn't going to be dead. My body would be dead, but I would be someplace. And when I started thinking it through from that standpoint, I decided that it was not a way out at all. It was probably a way to make everything worse. And not the least to be considered was I had 2 children at the time who would have been really devastated had I done that. So that was also a factor. So faced with not being able to go on living the way I had been and not really being able to commit suicide either, I made what I call a 500% whole body commitment to healing. And whatever it took, whatever I had to face, and I really believe that it was that level of commitment that began to set up the time, places, people, situations that guided me through my healing process. So that was a very significant time for me to back away from the suicide and to make that full commitment to my healing. It's probably worth interjecting here, too, that many people that I've talked to about my childhood said, oh, you were an early indigo. You were an early indigo child. And then I listened to Dolores Cannon the other night, and definitely I'm a first waver. So that's been very clear to me as I've progressed through my healing process, that there is something there to that. 1989, we had George Knapp on KLAS TV doing his nightly series on UFOs, the best evidence. And I was absolutely glued to the TV for every single segment. I still have it on a VHS tape because I taped every single one. And I was sitting on the sofa and my nails dug into the cushion. I was just like, you know, and it was a lot of it was very triggering for me. I know now, because I'm a certified body-centered life coach, that that's called a body flag. The heart palpitations, that's a body flag. That's an indicator of material going on under the surface that's causing upset. You know, to have that reaction to a TV show, that's a body flag. That is some indicator of an underlying upset. So these were things that I learned later on. Discovering missing time. I had a good friend of mine named Dirk, and we were talking about all kinds of things, UFOs and spirituality and all kinds of things. We had these great conversations, and he noticed that whenever I talked about my military time, I kind of got really vague and just kind of glossed over it and went on to another subject. And he thought, well, that's really odd because she's so bright and so articulate about every other thing we discuss. He wanted to know more about that. So he sat me down one afternoon and he says, I want you to tell me about your military time from beginning to end. Just go through it chronologically. So we did, and we went through these different levels, entered the military in Cleveland, Ohio, boot camp for 6 weeks at Lackland Air Force Base. I remembered quite well that I was in the 3903rd Squadron unit. I attended technical training at Keesler Air Force Base in Mississippi. After that was completed, I went back to Ohio to spend Thanksgiving and Christmas with my family and my little girl. She was 4 years old at the time. And then my daughter and I traveled out to Nellis Air Force Base, which was my first duty station after technical training school. And then we got out there, I got a roommate, and she was the one that was going to take care of my daughter for me when I went up to Tonopah every week, because the rotation was for 554th Range Group was you would go up to the test site for a week, and you'd stay at a motel, you'd be billeted at a motel up there in Tonopah, and then every morning they'd take you out to the test site, you'd do your work on the range, and then you'd come home. When I got to that part of my memories, I remembered what I just told you, and I remembered that I worked there, but I didn't remember any details whatsoever. No details whatsoever. I remembered nothing about the people I worked with. I remembered nothing about the compound, nothing about the radar site itself. I didn't remember anything. I had to work very, very hard to retrieve even the tiniest detail of memory about that experience. And with the discovery of that missing time came another body flag, a huge wave of nausea. I didn't actually throw up, but I did feel very sick to my stomach when I realized that there was about 3 months of my life I couldn't remember any detail from whatsoever. 3 months of my life I couldn't remember any detail from whatsoever. 3 months of my life I couldn't remember any detail from whatsoever. 3 months of my life I couldn't remember any detail from whatsoever. 3 months of my life I couldn't remember any detail from whatsoever. 3 months of my life I couldn't remember any detail from whatsoever. 3 months of my life I couldn't remember any detail from whatsoever. 3 months of my life I couldn't remember any detail from whatsoever. 3 months of my life I couldn't remember any detail from whatsoever. 3 months of my life I couldn't remember any detail from whatsoever. 3 months of my life I couldn't remember any detail from whatsoever. 3 months of my life I couldn't remember any detail from whatsoever. 3 months of my life I couldn't remember any detail from whatsoever. 3 months of my So in 1994, I attended the Whole Life Expo in Las Vegas, Nevada, and Bud Hopkins was one of the speakers there, so I attended his lecture. And at the question and answer part, I raised my hand. I said, okay, well, I have this strange dream from childhood about being left alone under a street lamp, and I have missing time from the Air Force, 3 months, and then I have this other weird dream that I had with a dark figure that was in my room when I woke up from the dream. You know, just a lot of experiences that had been plaguing me up to that point. And he pointed to me and he said, speak to me afterwards. So I did that, and I told him a few of the things that were going on for me and how concerned I was, especially about the missing time from the Air Force. And he asked if I'd like to do a session with him that evening, and I said, yes, I would. I really need some answers about this. So we did a session, and my life changed forever that night. Pretty much turned my life inside out. I did discover that alien abductions had started for me in childhood, and we recovered at least some of the missing time from the 3 months in question from the Air Force, and it was really, really very, very traumatic. It was very, very terrifying. I had a headache that began during the hypnosis session, and it persisted despite all of his attempts to try to cause it to go away with a suggestion, and it persisted for 3 days afterwards. And incidentally, talk about commitment, setting up the time, places, and situations for your healing process to emerge, even though it may not be easy for you. I was actually working back out at the Nevada test site at that time. I was working for SAIC when all this started coming to light, and more to that. Right now, I'm going to show you a little video clip because way back in 1995, I was in a documentary called Dreamland by Bruce Burgess. It aired on TV in 1996. And I did a little segment in that in shadow. I did not want my identity to be divulged. And now I'm going to run that clip for you now.
This is the Nellis Air Force Base, one of the top military installations in America. It's split into 4 main areas. The Tonopah and Nevada test sites, where America's top secret nuclear tests take place, as well as the Nellis bombing range, where the latest jets and bombers are put through their paces. It's also home to Area 51, so if there are flying saucers being tested over the desert, then the personnel at Nellis definitely know about it.
We were contacted by a former radar operator at Nellis, who confirmed that she had witnessed a classified flying disc test out in the test range. She left the Air Force in 1985 and is too frightened to reveal her true identity. The flying disc test took place at night in the desert a few miles from the base.
I was at that moment standing on the deck of the radar van. It was nighttime, and I was looking up in the sky because there were saucers up there. There were 10 to 15 saucers, and they were glowing orange on the bottom. The one that was closest to me, I could see in pretty good detail. I was standing with a group of people of whom I did not know any of them, and they did not appear to know each other. So it seemed like we were all very isolated. No one was talking to anyone. It was very frightening because what I was seeing was definitely something that was very highly classified, and there was a couple of people talking inside the radar van who I assumed were officers, but no one was wearing any rank insignia and no one was wearing any name tags. The maneuvers that they executed were very sophisticated, so my guess is that they were being piloted by aliens who knew exactly what maneuvers they could do.
As part of the test, she was taken to what she believes was Area 51.
We were taken to a medical facility that was very sophisticated. Someone came and took me into an examining room, and they had me lay down on a stainless steel table. And someone came in through the door, walked around the table up beside the right side of my head, saying in a real deadpan, monotone voice, "Stay calm, stay calm, stay calm." When he got up by the side of my head, he had a hypodermic needle hidden in his hand. He brought it up, and it went straight into the right side of my neck. And whatever chemical it was went straight to the brain.
It has taken her over 10 years to come forward with this information.
It has been very difficult to talk about this. It's almost like every time I relate the story, it gets a little easier, but when I first started talking about it, it was like my mouth didn't even want to form the words, and the sound didn't even want to come out of my throat. So I can only guess from that there was a very strong suggestion given to me not to talk about this, not to remember it, and if I did remember it, not to ever talk about it to anyone. Okay, so as you can see, it's a long journey from doing that in shadow back in 1996 to being in front of you today in the full lights. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks. There were some errors and omissions in that information that Bruce Burgess put out. Maybe just, thoughtless errors on his part, but I just wanted to clear a few of those up. I did not contact him. I had actually related a bit of my story to Glenn Campbell, who had the Area 51 Research Center in Rachel, Nevada at that time. And it was Glenn Campbell that put me in touch with Bruce Burgess, because Bruce was looking for people that had testimony to offer. So they contacted me. I did not contact him. I left the Air Force in 1983, not 1985. And the Nevada test site is more than a few miles from Nellis Air Force Base. It's 65 miles to the Mercury Gate and probably 100 or more to Area 51. And many people don't really understand the anatomy of the Nevada test site. There's like a section that's the Nevada test site. Then there's the bombing and gunnery range attached to Tonopah, attached to Talitha Peak. Within the Nevada test site, there are many areas that are all numbered. There's 21, 25, 32, 35, 34. There's many different areas out there, all with a designated number. When I was working at area, I think it was 25, I'm not sure right now, but it was the place where they were having the Yucca Mountain Project, which was where I worked for SAIC. And we called it Jackass Flats, and I thought that was a very good name for the place because the idea of putting a nuclear waste repository in a place where there are signs of old volcanic activity is a dicey proposition at best. So that covers kind of the Nevada test site. I didn't really discover the missing time until much later after separating from the military. The memories I retrieved were from hypnosis. I felt that the television audience should have been informed of that so they could make up their own mind. They shouldn't have been left with the impression that it was consciously recalled. And there's a reason that it wasn't consciously recalled. It was because of the trauma that was experienced, caused, if you saw Fred Burke's presentation, he talked about multiple personality disorder or dissociative identity disorder, as it's now called. And definitely when you're put under severe trauma, you disassociate. And part of you just splinters off and buries itself to protect your whole personality and allow you to continue living some kind of normal life. And this other piece is locked away until you can deal with it. So the craft that I saw, a lot of people ask me if it was ET craft or whether it was back engineered craft. And I would say it could have been back engineered, but it was to me, it looked like it was ET craft. The saucer simulation was more or less accurate. So this is just going to go over this quick. A place that I worked some years after all this came to light for me, they had these chairs in the facility, and this chair is just like the waiting room chairs that we were sat down in at that medical facility. It's exactly the same. So when I saw that chair, I thought, oh my God, I've got to get a picture of it because it's exactly the same chair. So this put me on a quest to try to find out what the heck had happened to me. What's going on? Little gray guys with big eyes I was prepared for because I'd read books on ET abduction. But I had never heard of military abduction experiences at that time, never a word. So that was intensely frightening stuff to cope with. And I had never heard of it, had me feeling queasy a lot of the time, very scared because I thought, God, somebody went to a lot of trouble to bury this in my memory. And now I'm remembering it and I'm trying to find out what's going on, so I'm talking to people, and so it really had me pretty paranoid for a while, looking over my shoulder all the time. And sometimes I did hear clicking noises on my phone and suspicious sounds on my phone, and it was a very scary time. I started to cross-check my own experiences with others. Bob Lazar also talked about possibly 9 craft out there on the test site. He also, at one point, I heard him say about going home from work and not being able to remember his workday. I guess he took the planes back and forth. I attended lectures and groups to learn more, and there was one group that I went to that really, it was a real tough one. I was sitting in this circle, and everybody was sharing their ideas of what had gone on for them. And when it got to be my turn, I didn't really want to give any details of my experience because I was actually hoping to hear details from other people that would confirm mine. So it became my time to share, and I said, well, it seems from this hypnosis session that I was taken out in the middle of the night when I was in the Air Force to test this radar on UFOs. And then we were taken to what I think was Area 51, and some kind of mind wipe procedure was done on me. And this guy across the room looked at me and he said, did they stick you in the side of the neck with a needle too? And I felt like someone walked over my grave because that's exactly what had been done. I described that whenever I would find those intersecting stories, those intersecting points, it was a sinking in quicksand feeling. You know, and every time it would happen, my deniability of what had happened to me, even though I felt the feelings and re-experienced it to a degree under hypnosis, every time I felt I got those intersecting bits of data that linked with my own, there would be this sinking in quicksand feeling of, oh God, you know, you just really would be upset by that. So again, more reading, study, and research, and again, because I was working for SAIC out on the Nevada test site, I was coping with having to work out there, and it was not easy at all. I didn't want to ride the bus because the bus had taken me to the medical facility in the hypnosis, so I was afraid to get on the bus anymore. So I drove my car out there and drove my car out to work. That meant that I was getting a lot less sleep because most people would sleep on the bus on the 2-hour trip out there. And I wore a buck knife on my belt because that's the only thing resembling a weapon to defend myself, should I need to, that I could get through the gate with. So I had a knife on my belt. I drove my own car for quite a long time. I did settle down and go back to riding the bus at one point, but I really didn't work there that much longer. I was laid off from my job there in 1996. Nothing to do with doing the documentary. But the documentary re-traumatized me because they didn't hide my identity enough. Anybody who knew me knew that was me in that video. It was really, really poorly hidden, and I had done it on the stipulation that my identity would be hidden. So I was really furious and even more scared and even more traumatized that they did such a terrible job hiding my identity. People would come up to me when that documentary was aired years later and say to me, "Was that you on that UFO show?" And I would have to say, "Yeah, it was." You know, if I wanted to be honest, I had to say, "Yes, it was me." Did a bad job of hiding me, didn't they? So, post-military employers. This is kind of an interesting point. All government contractors from 1984 to 1996. And now I have to wonder, was I being monitored? Most of these government contract jobs require a yearly physical. And that would be a great way to get blood work information on whatever those injections had done to me that I underwent out there. The science applications, the hiring circumstances for SAIC were very unusual. A year after going to work for them, I was out in the trailer with the other people that I worked with. We were called geotechs because we worked with samples of rock that was drilled from Yucca Mountain, laying it out for geologists and cutting samples from it and everything. So I was out in the geotech office area, and my fellow geotechs, which were all guys, said, "You know, Niara, we were really glad when you came to work here." And I said, "Why is that?" And they said, "We all got a pay raise so you could come to work here. Over $1 an hour, retroactive a year or so back." And I said, "What?" You know, and what had happened was when they sent me a job offer, when I interviewed for SAIC, they sent me a job offer that I thought was a pretty low rate of pay, considering that I had to take a bus 2 hours to work, then 2 hours home, and work a 10-hour workday 4 days a week. I just thought, you know, the first offer they made, which I think was about, you know, $7-something an hour, maybe $8 an hour, I just thought, you know, I don't really want to put up with that kind of a schedule for that amount of money. So I sent them a letter back, said thank you very much, but no thanks. And then they sent me another offer at a higher rate. I think it was like $9.15 an hour. And I thought, well, it might be worth it for that. So I went ahead and took the job. And then later on, I found out that they gave all these guys a retroactive pay raise so that I could come to work there. Now, I don't know how many of you work government contracts or ever have, but government contract jobs, they really don't want to pay you any more than they have to. And they begrudgingly give you a 3 to 5% pay increase a year for cost of living. And so it really seemed to me very unusual that they would hire me, an unknown quantity, and give me this pay hike, not even knowing exactly how I'm going to perform in the job, and then have to make it retroactive for the other guys so that they aren't financially abused, just to hire me. I put that together with what I was discovering under hypnosis, and it really gave you the screaming willies to try to look at that. So about from 1997 to 2003, I just had to shut down and run away. I couldn't take anymore. I had done all the study and research and running around to groups and kind of frantically looking for answers. The ETs weren't talking, the government wasn't talking, the military wasn't talking, and I just thought, all these people that have had experiences or study experiences are running around trying to put all these pieces together like mad, and there's no real answers coming. So I just thought, the heck with it. You know, I just have to get out of this. I want to go back to my life. My life stood for spirituality and nice people, and this is really awful stuff. I just don't want to look at it anymore. So I just went back to trying to live a spiritual life, to doing my meditation and my yoga and eating my health food, and I just didn't really want anything to do with this anymore. But again, that commitment that I made when I was about to kill myself really helped things come back to the forefront of focus. And I realized that I couldn't really, well, the essence of yourself as a spiritual person, the essence of a spiritual path is to know yourself deeply. How am I going to know myself deeply when I have this black box that I've shoved all this stuff in the back of my mind, but I don't open it or look at it anymore? I would bump into it all the time. So finally I realized that I had to go back, open that box up, and deal with the emotional fallout. And at that point, I had moved to Durango, Colorado, and found a really good healer to work with. I actually needed to fill in more hypnosis. I wanted to know what happened after the injection, and so I also found out about more abductions by grays, and all that information, which is also, I think, very important for other people who are contactees or experiencers. That will be in my book, which is called Facing the Shadow, Embracing the Light, and I hope to have that book out by June. But I'm talking about the military experiences today. So while I have this up, so after the injection and the military experiences, after the injection, that chemical went straight to the brain. I was drugged by 2 security guards down a very, very long flight of stairs through a different door. You know, we entered through one door into that little room, and we went down the stairs through another door. It was a nightmarishly long flight of stairs. I can only assume that it went underground. At the base of the stairs, there was a little room that I was unceremoniously dumped into, and the door locked behind me. It was empty. It had one light bulb up in the corner, and there was a one-way glass that was mirror on my side, and I looked at it, you know, kind of, I was shaking and going through the effects of the injection, but I noticed that there was that there, and I thought, they're watching me through that glass. And of course, I couldn't see them, and I went through the effects of that injection, and I was shaking so hard that I felt like I was going to literally shake apart. I just was shaking and shaking and shaking. And I laid on the floor of that little room with my arms wrapped around my knees to try to hold myself together. And for a good amount of the time that I was in there, I just screamed and screamed and screamed. And it was really, really horrible. So as if that wasn't horrible enough, as soon as the screaming subsided because the effects were wearing off, I was still shaking, I was dragged out of that room, and I was raped by the 2 security guards that pulled me down there. I do remember what they looked like. For some reason, I'm thinking I don't want to go into that right now. But 8 people were watching this happen. One of them was a gray alien, and I felt from him, maybe because of my abductions or my contacts, I was sensitive to their telepathy, but I felt him thinking, why on earth would these people treat one of their own in this fashion? You know, he just didn't really understand. So this is going on. I remember feeling completely and totally terrified and an equal measure of totally enraged. And I remember that I was doing the disassociation because I didn't want to be in my body with what was happening. And so I memorized the sofa that it happened on. And I have a picture that I drew of that sofa on my table. And if you guys are interested, you can come and see that, because I remembered it in great detail, because I didn't want to remember or be in my body with what was happening. So it's just a little hard to go on from here. Some of the other things that I remember were being walked around underground facilities, and again, complete transcripts are going to be in my book of my later hypnosis sessions. I actually did them with Gloria Hawker. And the session with Bud, I don't have the transcript because the tape quality was so bad, it was just about impossible to do any transcription from. So anyway, other experiences that I had beyond those, which were really quite enough to cope with, were of being walked around in the underground facilities. And I think I really need to do more hypnosis and try to piece together more of what happened. But dealing with what I've had to deal with has been so traumatic, I have not been anxious to go out and do more hypnosis sessions. It's because to a certain degree you re-experience what's happening to you in the hypnosis. So we were walked around in the underground facility at one point. We walked by an open doorway into what looked like a small laboratory. And in that laboratory, there were some people. One of them was a woman, and there was a reptilian sitting in there. And that was really startling to see that. And then this is one thing that I brought up that I was going to say here at the UFO Congress, because I've never talked about this publicly or written about it publicly up to this point. And this is going to be fairly sensational information. And again, it needs more hypnosis and more study to find out more about what happened. But in my hypnosis memories, I remember being taken to the moon. I remember being put on a saucer. Melinda showed a picture of a saucer with feet down. And that was very, very similar to the saucer that I was put on. And I was with two guys. We were told to lay down on the floor. We were being transported like cargo. So we had to lay on the floor. The chairs were for more important people. So we laid on the floor. We were taken to the moon. And while I was there, I was worked very, very hard for the entire week that I was there. Hard work during the day and more sexual abuse at night with multiple people. And so the reason that nobody missed me for that week was because we went to Tonopah for a week at a time. People at Tonopah were told that I was sent back to Vegas because I was sick for that week. The people in Vegas thought she's up in Tonopah doing a regular weekly shift up there. So I was not missed for that whole week. But again, it's not the kind of thing you want to remember. You know, when I had the hypnosis with Bud, it was, rough enough to deal with. And I thought to myself, well, now what do I do with all this stuff in my head? I don't know what to do with it. How am I going to live a normal life? Knowing what I know. I mean, the whole idea of the United States of America I grew up in school learning about went up in smoke. That was just a complete sham. That was a farce. It didn't exist for me anymore. And I just thought, how am I going to do this? And you go to your friends and you try to talk to them. They don't want to hear about it. Oh, that's too scary. Are you sure you aren't mistaken? And you have this stuff rattling around your body. Are you sure you're not mistaken? Are you sure? And it's just like, well, I don't want to believe it either, but it's in here. It's in here. And so you try to live a normal life. You don't want to upset your family. You don't want to upset your friends. So you try to, plaster over it as best you can and go on. Well, it just doesn't work. I'm telling you, it just doesn't work. You've got to deal with this kind of thing once it comes out. And finally, I did find somebody I could work with to deal with it. And I remember thinking, just to lighten things up a little here, I thought to myself, if I start talking about this, the only career opportunity for me is going to be speaking out at UFO conferences. I'll be damned if that's going to be the only thing I do with my life, But here I am. So, the universe has a way, again, of prying your fingers away from everything you're trying to do to avoid your destiny until all you're left with is what you're supposed to be doing. So here I am. So, thanks. Okay, so I kind of have to move along here, I see, with my timer. This is kind of a case in point. I found lots of intersecting testimony with my own from time to time, but this one is kind of notable. There's several points here. This is Above Black, Project Preserve Destiny, book by Dan Sherman, who was trained as an intuitive communicator because of his prior contact and adjustment by ETs while in the womb. Similarities, he was picked for this special duty because he was an abductee and had been adjusted by extraterrestrials in the womb. I have felt extremely strongly that my superiors knew this about me also, and that I was picked for the radar exercise because I was adjusted or hybridized, a child of both my parents, but with something extra added in. Sherman was forbidden to talk to his classmate in intuitive communicator school. And the interesting thing about my experiences on the radar site that night was we were given fatigues to wear with no rank insignia, no name tags, no identifying marks of any kind, and we were forbidden to speak to each other beyond what was necessary to run the test, effectively isolating us from each other. Sherman mentions that he has a little bit of Cherokee in his bloodline. I also have some Cherokee ancestry from my father's side of the family. That was actually partly in the choice of the color I wore today. Red, I think, is a warrior color, and I'm doing a warrior act here. And the blue, red in Native American tradition is for the red road that we walk in this life on earth, and blue is for the blue road of spirit. And I feel like I have a foot on both. So, thanks. So, how can such things even happen? What research uncovered is secrecy around extraterrestrial craft is just part of the puzzle. The world we think we live in is kind of a sham. I found out about Project Paperclip, Monarch, MK Ultra, a lot of it from Fred Burke's and team wanttoknow.info website and transformation team course. Highly classified black projects do exist. And it's the National Security Act of 1947 that makes all this possible, because it creates a legal curtain of secrecy that you can't penetrate in a court of law or in usual inquiries, because things are thrown out for reasons of national security. As sick as its secrets, the shadow government. In a world where more and more countries are releasing UFO files to the public, the US is looking more and more like a holdout. The National Security Act of 1947 and all the criminal abuse that's gone on behind its curtain for reasons of national security is likely why the US is dragging its feet on official disclosure. Just whose security are they protecting anyway? They certainly were not protecting my security. They certainly weren't protecting Melinda's. They certainly weren't protecting all the other people that are picked up and abused for mind control projects or black projects or any number of things that go on. I don't know whose security they're protecting anymore. It seems to me they're using this security to harm the very public and society that they are supposed to be protecting. So as far as I'm concerned, the National Security Act of 1947 must be abolished and all the information come out. And anything that applies to us as human individuals also applies to us as a human collective. And so if we want collective society and culture to have mental health, we have to have transparency in our world, or it's just not going to happen. So another thing that we need to facilitate disclosure is a really well thought out amnesty program to protect people that have been trapped inside these projects through threats to themselves or their family or other means. False memory syndrome. I think this is really important. I'm just going to go ahead and read this. As we emerge into a world in which research in quantum sciences give working theories that support parallel research and findings in energy and mind-body medicine and healing, we learn that it's the power of our consciousness exercised through our minds that shapes and influences for good or ill both our reality and our biology. The human body is not simply a purely physical mechanism that can be tinkered with and altered at whim. It is an energy system based on an energetic template. It has an energy field that stores information, is linked to a larger universal energy field that steps the energy down through multiple dimensions that culminate but are not restricted to the physical body. It is this field that is accessed in hypnosis or through skilled intuitive readings to access memories from the current lifetime and other lifetimes. There's a lot of research that shows that CIA operatives form this foundation and sit on the board of it, an agency with a lot to hide and avoid scrutiny that memories retrieved from hypnosis could raise. Blocking memory in the material physiology, this matter stuff that makes up our body, blocking memory in this and in the physical brain tissue is only a physical part of the energy network of information that constitutes memory. Memory has an energetic and vibrational component that are multidimensional and that exist in the human energy field or aura and not only in the body's physiology. So I think we need to rethink this whole false memory syndrome foundation. And as Fred said, if false memories can be implanted, they're still going to be shown through energy medicine eventually, I'm sure that I'm going to be vindicated on this, that they were false and implanted because the information doesn't exist elsewhere in the energy system of the human body. Overcoming overwhelm. When you get into all this, it looks really dark and really ugly. My own experiences and the feelings that went with them were direct evidence of the reality of this dark part of our world. I had more than one existential crisis dealing with this information. My choice was to stay afraid and angry and shut down and quiet, or to heal, to step up to the plate and really choose to heal, and I chose the healing. The only way out for my healing was to kind of go back to my spiritual roots of childhood, and this conscious connection that I had to a conscious loving universe, a source creator. This is another thing that I think is really important to read. This is from Paul Levy. He has a website called Awaken in the Dream. Trauma is a normal, healthy response to an insane and intolerable situation. There is an intimate correlation between being traumatized, abused, and wounded, and having a shamanic initiation, spiritual awakening. Trauma is an experience that is overwhelming to the ego in that it can't be assimilated by the ego in the typical way. Trauma initiates and catalyzes the deeper process of the archetype of the shaman to begin to formulate and crystallize itself in the unconscious of the future shaman. This precipitates a deeper part of the psyche to become mobilized as the shaman journeys deep inside themselves to address and become acquainted with what has gotten activated within them. So this is a process of spirit or soul retrieval. It has to take place because literally in trauma-based mind control techniques, parts of you are splintered and fractured away, and you have to gather all that back together and reintegrate it into a larger whole, and the pieces have to have more space in them to include the parts of the world that you now know exist. And if people ask me, they don't want to face up to the fact they don't want to look at it, but the important thing is to realize is the trauma that occurred, it happened to me because I was in a very special reality that was conditioned in a certain way. Okay, I thought that I lived in a society with laws and due process, and that if somebody did something bad to me, that I could go and have them prosecuted or have protection of the law in some way. And then I went out to this total other area where none of the usual rules applied. And it overwhelmed my consciousness. It overwhelmed my ego. And for people that don't understand that those kinds of things can go on, they are also at risk of that kind of trauma until they look at it and accept that it does go on. So you move from the place where not knowing this kind of thing and then experiencing it or hearing about it can be a trauma. And if you know that it can happen, you downgrade that to, well, that's really disturbing, but maybe it won't shatter your ego to hear about it or even experience it. And God forbid any of you experience what I went through. So, outer resources were body-centered and somatic experiencing therapy that allowed to feel the feelings to completion, or allowed the trauma to completely discharge from my body. And I had somebody who was wonderful to stay with me and coach me to stay with what I was feeling so that it would have a chance to discharge. Again, I want to really have gratitude for Fred Burks and the team that created the Transformation Team course and the wanttoknow.info website. It's a wonderful, wonderful group of people. I had the loving support of some loyal friends by this time. And my inner resources, of course, were my lifelong spirituality and my connection to nature. The expanded viewpoint, shedding the victim mentality. So I had this concept of 100% responsibility, which I took further from my coaching training. Looked at why did I come here to planet Earth, and discovered the idea of a soul contract, that maybe I signed up for this in the beginning. And as rough as these experiences have been, they shook me awake in a way that I wouldn't trade for anything today. So it's a big statement to make, but if all the experiences I've had have made me who I am today, then I have to be grateful for every part of it. It was a bitch to get through and heal from, but here I am today. So, and then you step into seeing the cosmic viewpoint, because I think that anything that puts pressure on us to change, to grow, to evolve, to expand, I call it evolutionary pressure. And the human race is under a lot of evolutionary pressure right now. The most important part of my message today is about moving beyond fear. I had to set aside so much fear to even be up here speaking to you today. This is my third public speaking engagement talking about these experiences. And what I had to go through to even be able to do this was I took every single thing I was afraid of and I would visualize it, and I'd walk myself through in a visualization and see myself moving through the experience successfully. Whatever it was I was afraid would happen to me, I would visualize it and see myself successfully moving through to the other side, even if it was my own death. Now, I don't want to die any more than anybody else, but if I did die, I know that I continue. The body, I drop the body, and I continue. So even if the worst came to the worst, it's still not the end of me. The other thing I found is there is an essential flow of energy in the universe, like the inflow and the outflow of our breathing. And that energy flow flows through our body. It actually creates our body through the chakra system. And so when that flow goes through the body, you know, it kind of has its ebb and flow, and it's kind of this dance of energy. Well, there's a whole system of energy there that wants to flow in harmony. And so what happens is if there's a block, then it bumps up against that. And when it bumps up against it, it creates friction. And that friction creates situations in ourselves that over time can create disease if they're not addressed, or over time, really create an upset in the mind, the body, or the spirit. And so energy wants to flow unobstructed. If it meets an obstruction, such as a trauma, then it works on it to resolve it. And it brings about, again, people, places, and situations to help you resolve the trauma. So that's to me my hopeful message, that whatever's wrong in our world, whatever's going on under the cover of secrecy, whatever abuses are going on, there is a universal energy flowing through everything that wants beauty, balance, and harmony. And when it bumps up against those obstructions, it's going to bring about the things that will open those up and get things flowing free again. I think we're seeing that in our society with the current chaos that we're going through economically, environmentally, socially, politically, every other way. I think it's evidence that that is occurring right now. Mind-body research. This slide I'm going to go through very quickly. Study the work of Deepak Chopra, Candace Pert, Dawson Church, Bruce Lipton, Greg Braden. Study quantum science and its implications for mind-body energy medicine and how we create our reality, because there's some real clues there. And I have to tell you, folks, ETs have a mastery of quantum science. We are in our infancy, and they have a mastery of it. And sometimes I ask, some of the more hardcore empirical researchers, I said, I think we all agree that UFOs are multidimensional, at least some of them are multidimensional or extra-dimensional in what they can do and achieve. And how are we supposed to pin that down and prove it in 3D reality? We need to expand our science. So basically, from kind of a military attitude, if I or anybody else stays stuck in rage, grief, or depression about what happened to me, then I let the bastards win, don't I? No, not going to do that. Not going to do that, not for an instant. So again, I kind of did this visualization, but again, in moving through the fear and getting on the other side of it, my consciousness began to light up like a Christmas tree. Abilities, we kind of name them clairaudience, clairsentience, clairvoyance, psychic abilities. I just lump them all into expanded abilities. I have started to come alive in a way that I never would have dreamed of before putting aside the fear. But as I put aside the fear, the wonderful part has been how my consciousness is turning on and awakening, and how my senses are expanding. So now I'm beginning to fulfill that potential that I had as that early first wave indigo child. And it's really, really a wonderful thing. It's said that the truth will set you free, but that's really only the beginning. Truth equals freedom, and that equals co-creative responsibility, individual and collective choice about the kind of actions we'll take to create our world. And that's we will take to create our world. Our freedom does not come from a government agency. It doesn't even come from our Constitution, wonderful a document as that is. Our freedom comes directly from Source Creator. It's not something anybody can give to us. It's not anything somebody can take away from us. It's something that we claim for ourselves because it's our birthright. So don't you ever surrender it for any reason. Once we have truth and freedom, it's in our hands. And we can become truly sentient as a species. And I think that that birthing into full sentience with vision and heart and conscience is one of the things that will create the common energetic ground for contact with extraterrestrials. So the choice is there, you know. Are we going to be mercenaries or vigilantes, you know, eye for eye, tooth for tooth kind of an idea? Or are we going to be honorable warriors of the heart and the spirit? You know, every day we're presented with choices, and we can choose in alignment with being warriors of the heart and of the spirit and with honor. So that's really about it. I know we've talked about some really rough things today, and one of the things that I've discovered that I can do in the last few years is channel some beautiful singing. So I'm going to do that just for a minute here. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.